Hello, I'm Maria Hall Brown, and this is LA Currents. When news happens in Los Angeles, it's a worldwide event, and when it comes to the LAPD, making sure the information gets out accurately and professionally is the responsibility of my wonderful guest this afternoon. I'm delighted to be joined by Captain Stacy Spell. Congratulations on this. You went from Captain 2 to Captain 3. I have no idea what that means.
So the good thing is it means a little bump in pay, and but it's also a little bit more responsibility, and I feel like it's also a bit of recognition for the work that I've been doing. So I'm just pleased about it, and I'm actually very grateful for you having me here today.
All right, well, I just referenced the fact that when news happens here in Los Angeles, you know, the LAPD, if it's involved in any way, shape, or form, needs someone to explain what happened. So at this moment in time, as a spokesperson for the LAPD, what is the definition of that responsibility? What is it exactly that you are supposed to do?
As a spokesperson, I mean, primarily, it's my responsibility to get information out to the public, you know, to the media outlets, really in a way that builds trust. Because I think the important thing is that when we're able to talk about things that have happened, or events, or just things that are going to happen, it's a way that we can really give people a sense of transparency and what we're about. And it also helps to demystify a lot of things that people don't know about police departments or how officers engage the public.
So you get quoted a lot. What you say literally represents the department. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. You know, we want to make sure that we're inclusive, that we don't say things that are going to further divide, especially when the whole purpose of giving information is to give people a greater, you know, sense of confidence in the police department.
Good afternoon. My name is Arturo Sandoval, Arturo.
Where is the line between what we should and have a right to have as far as transparency is concerned? So where is that line, and how do you determine that line?
It's a line that depends on variables. I mean, there are certain things that are concrete as far as, you know, if we have an arrestee, for example, you know, that information by law, we have to put that information out there. But also when we look at crimes or events, there may be times where there are witnesses or even victims, and their identities that we have to protect. There are things that we do that if we release information, it may turn around and jeopardize our ability to find additional suspects. As much as we want to be transparent, we give all the information that we can, but then those things that'll potentially jeopardize public safety, you know, those are the things that we'll hold back.
What if the story is about the LAPD? What if it's not about a case outside the LAPD? What if it is the LAPD? How tough is that?
I know there's been a great deal of criticism of, you know, the department and the profession as a whole, but I'd share that there's a term, you know, Chief Michael Moore uses, and he says, you know, we want to lean into this, and oftentimes that's exactly the approach. Is, you know, rather than shy away from controversy, we want to lean into it. Now there are times where, you know, again, there's information that we can't put out there, but quite frankly, I mean, people are able to obtain information through California Public Records Acts. About the department, or there are times where they're asking specifically about a policy or a stance. And there are times that, although it may be uncomfortable, because, you know, we're human beings and we don't always get it right, you know, we have to talk about, like, what are those efforts that we're doing to try to be better. And we have a core value, quality through continuous improvement, and that's really, I mean, that speaks volumes about the department's want and desire to better serve.
Being a law enforcement officer is in the family. You know, your father was as well. And so do you see the difference between what his world was and just what law enforcement is now? I mean, what are the major changes?
I think about how different, I mean, our worlds are, and even how different the police department has been and the profession has been in the last 27 years that I've been on. I mean, where I've seen a much greater approach towards constitutional policing and just a greater deal of training where, you know, there's an understanding if we stop or detain someone, you know, it has to be with reasonable suspicion, or if it's for an arrest, probable cause. And really just understanding the difference between a consensual encounter and what could elevate to a detention. So just overall, I mean, much of it's philosophical in the sense that it's an approach that the department wants to understand. One, we haven't always gotten it right. And the times that we haven't gotten it right in the past, I mean, as a profession and as a department, it's impactful. And it really creates a way that people think and for us to be transparent and for us to be, very, very open or honest. We can't go back to like the old days where somebody mentioned, well, media relations of, 20 years ago, oftentimes it was no comment.
Exactly.
The approach we take now is it's much more open. I also look at the levels of training that our people receive when we look at, crowd management and crowd control. Although there have been critics of, the summer's events, by far and large, we had hundreds and hundreds of protests that went off peacefully, because oftentimes, the officers, the command staff were taught to stand back, give a little bit of space, allow for, the folks to express themselves, and especially if it was an outside issue that didn't involve the department specifically, don't become the show.
What are some of the good stories that if you had your druthers, you would be out every single day on, national prime time saying, this is what happened today?
So I think about a number of things that I've seen on body-worn video. I remember there was one particular instance where a couple officers, and they ran across a homeless man, and they gave him like a starter suit, like a workout, just workout gear. And I think about how he received that, his expression, and how moved he was by these officers' compassion, and the fact that, just getting something as simple as a fresh, set of clothing, how it gave him different perspective. And so I see stories like that really demonstrate the humanity and the compassion of our officers, and I'm moved by it. And those are the stories I want to tell every day. There was one other story just pretty recent, maybe about 2 months ago, where we had an officer who was engaging a young man who wanted to take his own life. And he was on top of a wall, and he had a rope tied to his neck, and he was ready to jump. And this officer was just so patient, and I think more importantly, he was very caring. And that's what ultimately talked this young man off of the wall and got him down into a safe place. And I think that his life was probably changed, because something that would have been a very permanent decision, is now something he can look back on, and he'd get the help that he needed. So there are many stories like that.
Is recruiting doing well? How is the tone and temper of recruiting right now?
So recruiting is challenging overall, but I think the good thing is that the men and women that we have doing our recruiting with the LAPD are phenomenal at it. So they're up to the challenges. Obviously, with the events of last year, there's a lot of distrust, and so overcoming that takes a tremendous amount of effort. I think it takes recognition that we don't always get it right. I will say we've been very fortunate, though, that I know we have a recruitment plan to bring on about 744 officers over the next year. Due to budget cuts, we lost a little over 600 sworn officers this year, and about 300 civilian employees. There are a number of communities where we try to do more outreach, knowing that we want to keep that reflection of the community that we have right now within the department.
If you could say how many of the good ones are there, what would you say?
I would say we are very similar to every other industry in the sense that the vast majority are the good ones. I think there are times, and I worked internal affairs for 5.5 years in various different positions, as an investigator, as an advocate, which means that I presented cases to a disciplinary board for either termination or high levels of penalty, and then I was an officer in charge of a section. And at any rate, all that to say that by far and large, most instances we saw that cops were doing the right things for the right reasons. There are times where when they didn't do the right things, it could be because of training. If you have a person who does something that's calculated and it's intentional, and they knew that what they were doing was wrong, then they don't have a place in this police department. But ultimately, I would say the vast majority of our officers do the right things for the right reasons.
And on that note, I am so delighted that we had this time to spend together, and thank you so much, and I can't wait to hear more stories from Captain Stacy Spell, as well as eventually Colonel. It was great to talk to you.
Thank you. It was great having you.
And that's a wrap on this LA Currents.